Hey everybody. So if any of you follow me on LinkedIn, I recently posted that I'll be doing videos every week. I think I'll be trying to do 2 to 3. This week I'm incredibly behind. After recently posting that last week, I was able to get 2 videos out last week. This week I've been really busy, but so I'm going to be posting these over the weekend, and then I'll be sharing it again on LinkedIn just to get the word out. But so to kind of get started, this video is going to be on Navisworks, the clash detection basics, and then clash data. Oh, and by the way, if you hear a puppy in the background, it's because recently I got a puppy about a week and a half ago. So you may hear him in the background. So if that's a problem, I apologize. But he'll probably be doing that sometime during this video and future videos. So anyways, so what we're going to look at here, and I'm going to somewhat wing this video. I'm going to try to show you the process. So there may be some things where it's like, okay, maybe I've got to think through this or remember exactly what I did in previous times that I've done the same thing. I'm going to try to build a Dynamo script. Now, I guess what I mean is I do have that one saved. I don't want to waste too much time going through that, but I'm going to build a Dynamo script at the end of this. But I'll be doing some stuff in Navisworks where I'll be winging it a little bit, in Revit where I'll be winging it. So just to kind of show you the process and stuff. So again, Navisworks, clash detection basics, and a little bit about clash data at the end. So to get started, we've got 3 things here. We're going to start with prepping the Revit models. So we've got a few other Revit sample models from Autodesk. We're going to look at prepping those and just getting them ready to clash. So we'll open up the Revit models, kind of dive into it. I'll show you exactly kind of what we'll be doing. So we'll be looking at creating the Navis, just some Navis views, just to keep things organized in our project browser. We have specific views set up so that we can quickly export them. Now, this depends on your standard, whatever it is, you can change it up. But for this video, or for the way that I've done things and the way that I've worked with other teams, is we'll set up underneath, and sometimes the naming and where it's stored in the project browser is different, but generally this is the naming. So sometimes there's Navisworks _ or Navis dash whatever the discipline is. As you see here, it's Navis mech, but you may see you can implement that in different ways. It doesn't matter. The nice thing though is if you do consistently name your views, you can easily automate that. So always keep that in mind when you're setting things up. If you were to just give this a discipline name, so and we'll come back to this when we actually get into Revit, but just speaking since we have this image here, but if you just gave this a discipline name, you could easily, or somebody could easily accidentally get into it and start modifying it, or it would be harder to export because there's probably other views with a discipline name associated inside of the name somewhere. So always keep those things in mind. And then we'll look briefly at the Navisworks export options. There's not very many, but there's some to keep in mind, and we'll take a look at that. Next, we'll jump into prepping Navisworks models. And so we'll look at just getting in there, setting up the clash detection. We'll look at creating sets. So we'll actually create some sets. And that's the part where we'll wing it a little bit because it's been a minute since I've created the NWC sets, or the sets for the clash detection that we're about to do. So you'll see that process and what I'm going to do to get those sets created and set up these clash detection tests. and then we'll run that, and then we'll mostly just see the clashes and quickly review it. And so we'll get through that pretty quickly. The third part of this is going to be visualizing the data. So that's going to be getting into Dynamo. So we'll build a quick script, and you can listen until the end to figure out this stuff, or you can just focus on the clash detection portion. But if you've seen me post on LinkedIn, I want to avoid doing the typical how-tos and stuff and really focus heavily on data. So I want to implement that data in every video that I have in some way. So in this case, visualizing the data that we essentially just created through Clash. And then now we won't dive into this too deep, but what we'll do is just kind of show. I'll just show the power. So this is a visualization in Power BI. I didn't personally set this up. It was somebody I worked with, a pretty awesome BIM person on the team that I work with, and they took the data that we pulled out of Navisworks and then relayed that information in Power BI. Something I can speak to a little bit is the percentage. So I did include that in there. Just so that, and it was a request from the other BIM person to see the percentage change, just so they could quickly show teams like, hey, you've increased by 12% or decreased by 12% in this instance, or sorry, by 0.12% since last clash test, since the last day that we did this. So something that you could bring up in meetings. So what I'm going to do is close this. We'll jump straight into Revit and then try to prep some of these models. So I think what we're going to do mostly is focus on this MEP model, and this is the advanced sample model from Autodesk. And what we're going to do is jump in this one and kind of separate the disciplines into their own Navis models, and then we'll just clash those. I don't want to complicate it too much and jump into a whole bunch of different models, so we'll just focus on this one. So to get started, what we'll do is just create a 3D view, which is what we have already here. And then over here, if we extend the project browser, we'll see 3D views, 3D. The first thing we'll want to do is rename this, and we can give it Navis, Navisworks, dash, and let's do underscore, and then let's just call this mech. So this is going to be all the HVAC stuff. We're just going to grab all that. We're probably going to separate this into 3 disciplines. So if we zoom in, we can see the duct and the air diffusers. We can see the lighting in there. So we'll probably kind of join that with electrical. You can see some cable trays. We see some outlets. So we'll join all those together all in one view. And then we'll probably do plumbing, which is just a few plumbing fixtures here. There's not very many plumbing items. So what we'll do now is just set these views up. So we have Navisworks. What we'll want to do is come over here to the subdiscipline, and then we'll switch this, and we'll just call this coordination. And then for the view classification, we'll call this one, I'm going to switch this around. We're going to call this the view classification. We're going to call this coordination. And then we're going to come up here, and then we're going to call this Navisworks. Now, if I remember correctly, so I use Imaginate Clarity to scan Revit models quickly and grab the Navis views and then export them independently into NWCs so that we can automate that portion of Navisworks. But if I remember correctly, I think it can drill down and find in this instance the subdiscipline, find that and then get all the views underneath it. But I'm not entirely sure. Because if I remember, I think it might be possible, and then if that is the case, then it's not a huge deal if we add Navisworks to this, because we can filter down and automate it that way. But one nice reason to add this is just so people know, like, hey, this is associated with Navisworks. I should not be in here. So the other part, which takes a little bit of time, is cleaning these views up. So we'll go to the visibility graphics, and we'll literally just start turning things off. You could get pretty creative with this if you have like a whole bunch of different filters. So as you can imagine, if you had a ton of different systems that pertain to piping, you could filter those and kind of separate those into their own NWC exports. So you could get pretty creative and create a whole bunch of different export or NWC views, or NWC slash Navisworks views that you can export, or you can have set up in your Revit model. So in this case, we'll just quickly turn off everything, and so we'll just check everything. Go in here, we'll grab ducts. We'll grab some of the mechanical equipment down here. And then we'll grab the flex pipes, or not flex pipes, but flex duct. We'll grab the air terminals. And then I think that's it. We'll just apply this real quick and quickly try to figure out if we're missing anything. Yeah, I mean, that looks good to me. Again, you can get creative, turn things on and off however way you want. So I'm going to press OK, and now we have our Navis mech view set up. Now, as you can imagine, I'm going to go through, I'm going to create another one of these views, and then we're going to do this for every single one. So I'm going to pause the video, create those real quick. I'm going to go through the same process we just went through for this one. I'm going to go through the rest, and then we'll move on to the next portion, which is exporting out these NWCs. All right, I am back. So I went ahead and created the electrical and plumbing, and something that I wanted to point out was when you go to create, you can come up here and create a new view. So after you rename it, it'll create a new 3D view, and you can see we've got some levels. Now this is up to you. I've heard some folks, they like these levels to be in their Navis models because they can quickly, or at least it can kind of help identify where something is, what level it's associated with. So it's just one way to, it's just visually, it just, if you're used to seeing it in Revit, then it doesn't have the same functionality in Navisworks where you select it and it kind of highlights the plane, but it does show up in the model, in the Navis model, and you can quickly or somewhat see what elements or where an element is associated, or at what level an element's associated with. So it's something that it's up to you if you want to bring it in. Personally, I don't like them. I think they kind of get in the way. So I'll go over to annotation, I'll do all, and I'll just turn off all this stuff. Another thing is I switched it to coordination. So there wasn't any confusion. I just switched it to coordination, and so that way I didn't run into any issues accidentally if a discipline was set to the wrong discipline. So to show you, here's the electrical view, here's the mechanical that we set up, and then here's the plumbing view. Plumbing did have a little bit more than what I thought. I forgot it had actual piping in there, but so this will be good stuff to actually clash. So we've got, a lot of piping in there. So now it's exporting time. So We're going to go to File. We're going to go to Export, and then NWC. I think if we jump over to add-ins, it's over there as well. So if we do external tools, and then we have Navisworks 2020, if we click on this, it'll take us to the same spot. I don't ever jump out there. I just go to the File tab. It's really up to you, whatever's easiest. And so I've got a folder that I'm going to set up, and there's a link below to my OneDrive that has content from every single video I've done, or at least a lot of them. And a lot of what we're doing here, like the sample models from Autodesk, though you can't get those out on the site, will be in the folder, and so will these NWCs, so will the Dynamo script. The Power BI won't, but the Dynamo script, the data and stuff will be in there, in these NWCs. So I'm going to go ahead and just rename this NWC. Now this is the Navisworks plumbing model. Now keep in mind, like, your process can be much different than what I'm doing. I mean, within the firm that I work at, we add project numbers because sometimes we'll have in the same model multiple plumbing NWCs because it has multiple buildings on the site or something. So sometimes we'll factor in, every time we'll factor in project numbers just to account for that. But you could have whatever, you can name it whatever works best for you. It depends on what your company does and what kind of projects you have. If you have a whole wide range of it, then maybe you need to get really creative with your naming conventions. But for something like this, I mean, a lot of times, like what we're doing here, works fine. So I went ahead and exported that and didn't jump into the settings, but we will check that out when this finishes. We're going to jump to Mech and actually look at the settings. I can't remember what the defaults were, so we may have to re-export plumbing again. But like I said, this is gonna kind of be on the fly. We're just gonna work through it. So we have the HVAC, and gosh dang it, do that again, HVAC. So actually, let's match that to what we have in our Revit. So we'll do Mech. Down here we have Navisworks settings. So if we click on that, there's a variety of settings. There's a few things to keep in mind. Convert construction parts. Now, I've actually seen this question get asked a lot. Like, how do I get construction parts in Navis? Well, there's a checkbox for that. Convert element IDs. Convert element properties. We'll turn that on. Convert lights. We're not going to be doing anything with lights. Convert linked CAD files. There's no linked CAD files in here. Sometimes you don't want to do that. Convert linked files. Now, I've heard of workflows where they kind of, instead of doing these multi-discipline views, they have like one view that just exports out a bunch of links. That process, I can't remember what it was, but it just didn't work for what we were trying to do. But that's always an option. You have an ability to just convert links instead of having to go to those models. Like, for example, if we had Arch linked into this MEP model, we could just run in this export, and it'll bring out the linked models. Or we could have a view called Navisworks _Arch _link that would export out that link view. We could go to that instead of having to go to the Arch model. So those are probably the big ones, the links. This one, I personally hate having rooms. Now, there was somebody I worked with that, for whatever reason, and this was somebody that did not get into Navisworks, was wanting to convert rooms as attributes, but all that does is it makes the, actually, sorry, I'm gonna, I always do this. It's the export room geometry one. That one is the annoying one. There's some folks that wanted to have this on. And really, I have not found any reason to want to clash this information. There might be some, potentials with like data extracting like what's existing in a room, but we can do that from Revit. For me, mostly this just gets in the way, and I'll show you later on when we get into Navisworks why that can be a big reason or a big problem. And there's ways to get around it though, but I personally do not want to export room geometry. Literally, it's just like a bunch of boxes will show up in your model, but it's up to you. I mean, if it's something that you need that information, you want to clash to make sure like, something's not going through a space that it should not be going through. You could use it for, things like that and quickly identify those elements. So you could even, depending on if those rooms have specific parameters associated with it, you could filter down to those rooms that are like, they can't have anything running through them. You can kind of hone in on those rooms and then clash against those with you can filter or set a filter that grabs those elements, those specific rooms in Navisworks. Faceting factor. Now, I've seen some folks, some companies set this, I think, to a 10 minimum, and it really just has to do with the geometry. I think I've done a video on this, so check out my video on this, and you'll see visually kind of what's going on. But they'll set it just because sometimes, I mean, it gets really, it's like when you have two ducks running almost next to each other, and because the faceting factor is so low, it doesn't pick up that it's a clash, but that's incredibly rare, or at least I couldn't, get it to not clash. I just leave it at the default 1. So anyways, this is what you've got. There's some other things as well, but for now, we'll just leave this as is. And then we'll go ahead. Oh, and this is another important one. So export, we want to do the current view. We do not want to do the entire project. So current view, and then we'll go ahead and we'll probably want to set this to project internal. And we'll go ahead and press OK. I'm going to rerun the plumbing, and then I'm going to run electrical, and then we're going to jump directly into Navisworks and set up the Navis model. So I'm going to go ahead and pause this again. Alright, so I went ahead and exported out the plumbing again, and then electrical. So I'm going to expand this, and this is the OneDrive folder that I mentioned before. I'll have this posted for you guys to just pull these down if you want. But here we go. Here's our electrical, mech, and plumbing. I am very the size of that the files is kind of weird to me. Electrical is so much smaller, but we'll see what happens when we get into Navisworks and append these files. So we're going to jump into Navisworks. I've already got it open. I've got a new file started. I can, I don't know if I can actually save this until it's, yeah. So I'm going to append the files that I just created, and then we'll start to, well, first let's just verify that everything looks good. And so we'll jump over here. We'll hide. Let's hide electrical. Hide, and then we see plumbing in there. Okay. All right. Well, we look good. So this is our model. This is our MEP model. Now, again, a lot of this depends on the way that your company is structured, or firm, or wherever you work. but so you may have structural in here. You may have other disciplines like audio visual, or you may even have architecture. Now, I don't generally clash architecture. Now, we do filter down to specific elements. We know that could cause issues, but generally it's the structure and the disciplines that we mainly focus on. But again, it depends on your structure, what disciplines are involved, if you're a contractor, if you're a subcontractor. I mean, there's a lot of variables. So in this case, we've got three models, 3 disciplines, and what we're going to do is just clash the overall NWC. Now, I mentioned that rooms cause issues. Now, in this model, it's probably not a big deal, but if you had, for some reason, if you had rooms in here, you would, if you weren't, and we'll get into this, selection sets allows you to grab specific elements and then clash them against stuff. It would work fine if we grabbed all the HVAC elements and not rooms. But if rooms were associated with that model, and we pulled the in the example I'm going to show you, we're actually going to pull the entire NWC and clash it against an entire other NWC. So we're going to clash, for example, mech against electrical. We're going to clash the entire file. So if both those files have rooms, we would get a bunch of extra clashes we wouldn't need. So earlier when I mentioned rooms can cause issues, this would be one of the cases that it would. So what we're going to do now is just set up our clash detection. We're going to set up some tests, and then we're going to set up some, we're just going to run them against, or we're going to clash them, and then we'll look at how to pull that information with Dynamo. So this is going to be pretty easy, because what we can do is just go mech versus plumbing. Let's do mech versus electrical. We could do mech versus mech if you wanted to see where, and then give it a somewhat of a tolerance, so that ducts that are connecting, or like a diffuser is connected to like flex duct, it doesn't pick all that stuff up, but it does pick up when something directly runs through an element. We can just do, we're not going to do all of them, but we'll do elect versus plumbing. And then now I'm going to show you how to create sets, but for this example, we can just come down here and grab the specific files associated with that test. So if we go up to mech versus plumbing, what we'll do is we'll grab mech, then we'll grab plumbing. So you can see that when we jump from that test back to the mech versus plumbing, we'll see mech, and then for our selection B, it's plumbing. This is one way to do it, but the issue with this is if you unload those files, reload other ones, or you save this and try to do this again, these selections are going to be deleted because these are associated with these specific NWCs. And so people create sets. Now currently you can see there's no sets here, and this is where you would see them if there was sets created. So I'm going to show you real quick how to create sets, because if you wanted to standardize this process, you would definitely need these created. This is where things are going to get, I'm going to wing this a little bit because I can't remember, I may when I get in there, I may remember, but right now off the top of my head I can't remember how I filtered the information. So we're going to work through that and figure it out. So this is the find items. You'll click here to pop this window open. We also want the sets dialog open. Can't remember where that's at, so we're just going to jump. I don't even know if it is there. I'm sure it is, but we're going to jump to the View tab, Windows, and then down here underneath Selection Tree, we'll click Sets. Let's expand that a little bit. And now what we want to do is filter and find these specific files. And what this will do is over here we'll run it, and then we can say find all, and then it's going to highlight what elements it finds, and we want it to find each of these individuals. So we're going to have to create 3 sets, one for electrical, mech, and plumbing. So we'll start off, you know what, first, and this is I think really important for any time you're creating sets. If we jump over to, or actually go back to Home tab, there's the Properties panel. It's already open, so I'm going to pin it. I'm going to close it a little bit, and then I'm going to select on Navis Electrical, and then we can kind of get an idea of what the properties are. So when we select here, we see Item. So Items, this tab here, we can come down here and see the source file name. We can see the name, we can see type, all sorts of information. What we care about is the Navisworks name, or the file. And what we want to do is we want to come back here, we want to go to Item. We want to do name. Contains NWC. Oops. And now if we find all, it should highlight all of them, which I thought it did it over here, and maybe it does, it's just getting messed up, but over here to the left you can see it grabbed all 3 of them. Now what we want to do is, again, Item, we'll just do name, and then contains elec. And the reason why we do both those instead of just typing in the actual name, if there's any differences between the name, which there shouldn't be, if you included this into your template, then it should always be the same. But if not, when you add it, you could try to account for things going wrong. If they spell out electrical all the way, you can still catch it. This also, by filtering out NWC, you're not grabbing any CAD files or like other files that you don't want to grab. This will filter out only NWCs and then the discipline. So if we come over here and do find all, you can see it just grabs the electrical NWC. Now we've got this selection. We're not done yet. This is kind of it's not very intuitive, in my opinion, of Navisworks, but with this setup, what you're going to do and why we have sets open is come over here, right click, and then there's 2 options. You should have Save Selection, which is a manual selection. That's if I was to select one element or a group of elements or a file, I could save that selection. But it's not smart. It's not based off of parameters, which is what we're doing here, where we're looking at these specific parameters and then grabbing elements. So when we update this file, it knows exactly what item to grab. So we're going to save search. We're going to name this just electrical. Or we'll do elec. Yeah, let's just do electrical. I can't remember if I've named that differently in other templates, but in this case we'll just do electrical. But again, whatever works for you. And then all we got to do is come over here, switch this to mech. Find all, we can see that it grabs the correct file. Come in here, save search, mechanical. Now we'll do it for plumbing. Oops. save the search. We'll just call this plumbing. Yeah, for some reason I felt like I would get messed up when I can't, like, these are generally pretty easy, but it's been a minute since I've set up the NWC filter, or the for this specific example. But I always forget, like, properties. I mean, that's where you go if you don't know the property name of the element you're trying to filter, and you just look at the properties and you say, okay, item, so that's the category over here, and then for the property, it's any of these parameters underneath property, and then the value is over here to the right. And that goes, I mean, by knowing that, you could set up sets for anything you could imagine inside of Navisworks. Just remember, and I have a video specifically on making sets, so make sure to check that out if that's something you want to learn more about. So there you go. We've got our sets, and now if we close this and we jump back to clash detection, and we look at standard, or we drop down this drop down here, we click on this drop down, we'll see sets as an option now. So instead of using the files, we can just use the sets, which searches for the file name. So we could actually grab mechanical in this example, and then plumbing, and then regardless on if we deleted this plumbing and then reappended it, or we started a new file and then brought in new NWCs, this will always pick them up correctly, as long as the naming is somewhat consistent with what we're searching for. This will always pick it up, and you don't have to do it over and over again. So always keep that in mind. Sets are really, really powerful. So we'll do this again. We'll switch this to sets. We'll jump to mechanical. Over here, we'll go to electrical. Sets again. And then we'll do electrical, and then plumbing. And then we're just going to back check. So we see mech and plumbing, mech and plumbing, mech and electrical, mech and electrical, and then electrical and plumbing. I always like to go back and check, but because it's like, I mean, I've gotten to the point where I know how Navisworks works, but if you're newer to Navisworks, it's not very intuitive, because it feels like when you hover over this and you select it, that it's just highlighting it, like you were highlighting text. It's not actually selecting it and saving it that way, but that's how it works. It just, to me, it's like, it doesn't feel very natural and how other programs work, but it's the way Navis does. And there's a lot of weird, like, very bad UI, I think, issues in Navisworks. So it sucks they don't really develop it, but that's what you get. Or at least that's what you get with Autodesk. But so we've got our test set up, and now what we can do is just run it. You can see we've got 44 mechanical against plumbing, 3 for mech and electrical, and then 4 for electrical and plumbing. So if we go ahead and jump over to results, we can start to visualize those. I'm going to unpin that. We don't need to see this anymore, so I'm going to unpin that. We don't really need to see that, so unpin it. And then now we'll just kind of go through these clashes. So you can see the pipe. You can see, I'm going to change this. Let's look at, so there's some settings over here to the right, and currently it looks like it's grabbing every single element. So sorry, I had that highlight, that's why. My bad. So I had, in this selection tree, I still had the plumbing selected, and it was throwing me off, the color and the fact everything was blue. But if we just check that, then we're good to go, and we can see our clashes. There's some options to keep in mind. You can see here everything's wireframed, or at least the elements that aren't directly clashing into one another. You can kind of mess around with those. You can set it to hide other. You can even show all clashes if you wanted to. And I'm not entirely sure why we're seeing everything in wireframed. Oh, there it is. So, okay, yeah, so dim other, which is, I don't typically dim. To me, it's not very helpful. There's plenty of folks that do this, and it is helpful for them. I am pretty comfortable in Navisworks. I can fly through there and have a good idea where I'm at, but dimming is an option. You can dim it kind of to try to give you context to where that clash is. Generally, I don't have all clashes on like I do now. I just have the one. A lot of times what I'll do is actually just turn on all the systems, kind of like this, so I can really see everything. But this could be really hard if you did an export or something, because those images, especially if there's architecture and structure involved, it could be really hard to figure out where a clash is. So this, there's a variety of options. It depends on the team and they're comfortable, how comfortable they are. Are they comfortable in Navisworks? If so, I would say just get in there and kind of fly through and look at your clashes. But typically, I'll just look at a clash this way, but there's plenty of options under there. You could even turn these off and just look at item 2 or item 1. So there's a lot of things. Status is just, if you set that to use status color, is these. So depending on where it's at, it'll quickly show you. So if it's active, reviewed, or approved, it'll show it based off of that color. But anyways, this is what we got. Few options. Play around with them and see. Something else that I will sometimes do, depending on the project, is if there's a ton of clashes, I will group stuff. I use the BIM track tool to group things. Check that out. I have a video on my YouTube channel about that tool, so that'll help group things. But what I do is I'll review clashes. So this one looks like an obvious clash, but it may not be that big of an issue. It depends really what the element. I mean, this is just lighting. It may not be that much of an issue. It depends. I can't speak for this element, but I would say that if the dimensions and everything align correctly, then this going through the middle of the pipe is there may not be a lot of wiggle room for you to shift this light over when it's in the field, so this might be a pretty big deal. But it depends on the elements. Flex duct sometimes duct itself can be. Insulation can be flexible sometimes. There's a variety of things to keep in mind, but this element could be a big issue, and so, or it could not be. It could be a small issue, and in that case, what I'll do is, and I wouldn't do this because I couldn't make the call, but for somebody that's an engineer, what I would say is set it to reviewed if you know it's not a clash. And then it won't stay in the new column, it won't stay in the active column, and it'll just sit there and reviewed, and then people can just ignore it. I've heard folks say that they won't set it to approved because of liability issues, but I see no problem setting it to approved if you're working with Navisworks internally and not externally. Maybe externally you could get in some liability issues, but internally I would say set it to reviewed. If you want somebody to review it, and then when they review it, set it to approved if it's good, or just set it to approved if you know straight up, hey, this is not an issue, this is approved. So those are there for that kind of workflow. So that's kind of it. We looked at setting up or exporting those files, appending them to Navisworks, creating the sets, and then running the Clash. And that, I mean, that's all it takes. It's not that bad after you kind of get in there and get used to Navisworks. It's really easy to set this stuff up. And so now what we're going to look at is the power or the Dynamo portion of this. And so I'm going to close this detection window. I'm going to zoom out, get a good view. I'm going to go over here and I'm going to save this file. I'm just going to call this Clash Detection Basics, and then we'll just save this NWF. Now when you open this NWF on your end, if you are going to use it, you should be fine, but you may need to reappend those NWCs, but I'm pretty sure you'll be fine because it's the NWF is in the same folder the NWCs are in. So we've got our NWF. I'm going to go ahead and I'm just going to close this file. It's saved, and I'm going to jump into Revit, Dynamo. So I've got this script. Now I was thinking, I think I originally said I'm going to run through this, I'm going to create this. But I can't remember if I said I was going to do it from scratch, but if I did, what I meant is we're just going to walk through this and kind of see the process, and then we'll just look at the outputs, and then we'll briefly look at what's in Power BI. So we start off with the string, and this is the file path for the file. Now, if you remember what we named it, this is the wrong file path. So what we'll do is just go and copy the real file path in here. Add that slash, backslash, and then we'll for the NWF we just made, I'm gonna grab that name and just add it in there. So there's our file path. Now yours is going to be different depending on, what your username is. So this node here, what it does is it looks at the what it does is it opens up the file, the Navis file, and it pulls out the information. Now this could be set to visible or not. If it's set to visible, it'll actually open up Navisworks. You will have to close Navisworks after you're done, or after it's done. False, it'll just run in the background. Now I have had a lot of issues with these nodes, but I would say for the most part they're awesome. If you're doing anything with Navisworks, then I would definitely recommend getting this package, which I have not mentioned yet. This package is from Dynaworks. I think Adam Sheether, I'm not totally sure how to pronounce his last name. I think, if I remember correctly, that's who developed this, or is one of the people that developed this package. But it's Dynaworks. It is version specific, so we have Dynaworks 18, 19, 20. In this case, I'm using Dynaworks 20. So again, this opens the file, it runs the it opens the Navis file. Now this one will run all the tests, so it'll rerun all the tests that we just did. In case there's new NWCs, it pulls in all the updated information. The next bit of this is getting the Clash, just get the Clash test. And so this is just all the Clash tests in Navisworks. Actually, this is not. So let me freeze a node over here. And then we'll run this. All right. Um, I had run this previously on a different model, but as you see now, running this, we now have our 3 tests that we just created. So this gets us the list of the clash tests. So the 3 that we created. This gets us all the clash results. So the 40 clashes that we saw before, and the 1 reviewed one, you can see here. Now, with that said, I found some issues with this where it'll just give me the resolved for some reason. May have be, I may need to clear out all the resolved tests and then run it again, which typically I would not say is the best workflow, but it might be a workaround. So if you do notice that you're just getting resolved here and not new and active and the manually set ones like reviewed, if you're not getting that, I would say clear out your resolved. If that's an issue, I would say set up a separate NWF that you have this Dynamo script running against. The other part is to count this. If you saw the Power BI dashboard, what we're trying to do is count the total. So in the Power BI, it just showed a total, and then it showed a percentage. Now, that's so all we need is to get a total of the clashes, and then we want to represent that information visually. In that case, it was discipline specific. So below, we can see just a filter. So what this does is it grabs the clash test, it turns them into strings, and then we can search. So let's do mech. Run that again. We'll see true. So we've got both tests. We'll do a filter by bool mask over here, and now we've got all the clashes that pertain to mechanical. And then what we can do is get the sum, so we can get the total, which is 47. And then what we can do is take that information and then put it in a CSV file. Now to do that, what we do is, and again, like I mentioned, it's a timeline, so we want to capture the total and the time. And then, over a week or a month period, you may have 4, or depending on how often you run the test, you may have a lot of data. And then you could easily sit down with the project team and say, hey guys, we went up 10%, what's going on, or we're doing really well, we're going, or you could use it as a talking point, but also as a something that you're planning around, so you could quickly see, okay, we're going in the direction that we should be going. We've reduced it 10%. We're on the right path to meet our goals. So we want the time. So we've got the sum, and then here what we'll do is just have a code block. It just says x that comma y, and it's just putting the 2 items into one list. Over here we convert that over to a string, and then and I do this so that we can just quickly convert it to a string, so that we can do this over here. Which is take that output, which is these 2 string values now, the date and the total clashes, and we pull that into the X over here. And what this does is it takes X and the first item in X, which is our date. And then it says plus comma. So it's going to give us a comma after the date. And then there's a space in between there, and it says plus X1, which is the second item in this list here, which is 47. So we get an output of date, comma, 47. We're doing this because of the CSV. It's a comma separated CSV, and this way these items will be in separate columns. So the first column will be the date, the second column will be the total clashes for electrical. And then over here, so that it goes to a new line, because I was finding some issues where it was appending the information to the the other columns. It wasn't just it wasn't appending the information below. So this \n means new line. So I just take x. So this is x. So I take y, new line, and then x. So we get a list that says new line, and then it prints out the x, which is going to be the date and the time. So if we go ahead and, the date and then the count. So if we go ahead and run this, and you don't have to have a CSV created, it'll go ahead and create it and name it this. So if we look at the folder, there's no CSV. You do see this one, but this is a Excel file. This is not a CSV. So if we run that script, you'll see that it creates the CSV file, and it creates it really, really fast. That's one nice thing about that node, is there's not much lag. Now, being that we did append, it will skip that the first line up there, but past that it'll keep appending below. So you can see we got our date, and then we got our total for the electrical. Now we could, simply, oops, I'm closing everything. We could simply name this, because there's no real reason for us to have the electrical in there if it's going to be a separated file. There's no reason to have the first column is the date, second column is the count, and then third column is what test that is or whatever. That is something you can add though to this Excel file, or you could change the name to say the discipline. It's really up to you. So now if we just kind of unplug that, I'll run it again. And the issue there is that the Excel file is still open. So run that one more time, and then you can see it's been updated. It's 1:43 a.m. And now you can see we've got our date, our new date, our new time. I can't remember. This should be fine, like your times and stuff should be fine if you I don't know if including the time is really that relevant, at least for some of the timeline thing, but this should work fine if you're running an automated process that'll just open it. I mean, I doubt you'll be running it in the same you sit down and open Dynamo, run it multiple times, but I think it's because it's caching the time, the date time, and it's not resetting it. So I'm sure if we close this CSV and we won't save it, and then we open up the Dynamo script and we look at the date time again, if we jump over here, if we delete this and then go to date now, and again, I would say you probably just need date, not the time. Run this again, and then open up the CSV file. You can see that it changed and updated the time. So what I think is it's caching the value there, and it's not letting it go. You won't run into that issue if you're using Dynamo Player, and you won't run into that issue if you're using an automated system. But you will if you're in the same session, running it over and over again. You will see that problem. These numbers will update this time because it's like cached in there. It'll kind of stay the same. So keep that in mind. And you can see it also was doing it for the date as well. And the issue, again, is it's caching that value. And I ran this earlier at, what is that? 11:42. So I ran this at 11:42, and it never changed. So it just cached it and just kept it there. So if you are running it, you're just going to have to delete the time again, or the date node, and replace it. Anyways, that's what I've got. I'm going to show you the Power BI dashboard, and then that'll be it. So again, I didn't create this visual. I did add the percent change there, so you can see when we kind of move down, we can see this went down 0.12%. We can see this actually went down 11%, and so on through the rest of this. Over here, I've got some measurements or whatever they're called. I think they're called measures. Yeah, new measure. But I've got one for prior clash. I called this one subtract. So you can see it just takes the total clash, subtracts it from the prior clash, and then the total clashes. But up here, this just takes the change equals divide change times 100, which the divide change is right here. It's confusing, or at least it was when I was setting it up. So I'm not trying to walk you through this, but I am trying to show you kind of what's going on in it. But what it does is it takes the totals and it just does a little bit of math to figure out the percent change. What annoys me is that if you right click on any of these, and if you go to analyze and then explain decrease, it'll tell you that it went down 0.12%. But it's like, okay, let's just tie that directly in here, and so that I don't have to hover over it. But so I have to go through this huge workflow to kind of go around that. Now, with this said, I just wanted to show you guys how or show you that this is possible. But I, in the future, might actually show you how to develop not just this, but a variety of different visualizations in Power BI. There's an article that I wrote, and I think a couple videos, where I actually show you how to do some of this in Python, but I may do one in the future with Power BI. Anyways, this is what I got. I appreciate your guys' time. Let me know if there's any questions or anything, and I'll see you in the next video.